You are aging faster than you think. And the most dangerous part is, you won't feel it happening until it's already too late. Not when your joints start to ache, not when your energy crashes, not even when your doctor tells you your numbers are borderline. It's happening right now, silently, at the level of your cells, where the real story of your health is being written one division at a time. You've been told to watch your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your weight. But what if I told you those are not the metrics that truly determine how fast your body is breaking down? What if the real clock of aging is something you've never even been tested for? Something that has been counting down every single day of your life without your awareness. Deep inside your DNA, there are tiny protective caps called telomeres, and every time your cells divide, those caps get shorter. And when they become too short, your cells stop repairing, your tissues begin to fail. And the aging process accelerates in ways that no surface-level health metric can ever reveal. This is where everything changes, because once you understand what's really driving aging, you begin to realize something most people never do. The rate at which you age may be far more controllable than you've been led to believe. And yet, almost no one is talking about it in a way that connects the science to what you can actually do about it. In fact, there's a critical mistake that most people make when they try to improve their health, and it ends up accelerating the very decline they're trying to prevent. And before this video ends, you're going to see exactly what that mistake is and why fixing it could completely change the trajectory of your health for the next decade. Hello, I'm Dr. Nathaniel Li. I'm an emergency medicine physician and a medical researcher. After more than 30 years of studying how the body protects and heals itself and witnessing patients struggle with chronic diseases that I now believe in many cases could be treated far more easily than we've been taught, I began to question whether we've been missing something fundamental about the body's natural ability to heal. And what I discovered completely changed the way I think about disease. Inside your body, there is a clock you cannot see. It doesn't tick in seconds or minutes, and it doesn't care how young you look on the outside. It measures something far more critical: how many times your cells can continue to repair, regenerate, and keep you alive in a fully functional state. Every organ, every tissue, every system you rely on is built on one simple process: cells dividing, replacing, and restoring what has been damaged. And at the very edge of that process, there is a microscopic structure that determines how long that renewal can continue. These structures are called telomeres. Think of them as protective caps at the ends of your chromosomes, similar to the plastic tips at the end of a shoelace that keep it from fraying. Each time a cell divides, a small portion of that protective cap is lost. Not damaged, lost permanently. You don't notice it, you don't feel it, but it is happening continuously, day after day, year after year, quietly moving you closer to a point where repair is no longer possible. Now imagine your cells like rechargeable batteries. When you're young, those batteries are fully protected, capable of holding and delivering energy efficiently, but every cycle of use wears down the protective layer just a little more. Eventually, the battery still exists, but it can no longer hold a charge. That is exactly what happens inside your body. As telomeres shorten beyond a critical threshold, cells lose their ability to divide. They either shut down completely or enter a dysfunctional state where they remain alive, but no longer perform their intended role. These are often referred to as senescent cells, cells that stop contributing but continue consuming resources, releasing inflammatory signals that disrupt the surrounding environment. Over time, they accumulate, interfering with normal tissue function, slowing recovery, and accelerating the visible and invisible signs of aging. This is the point where aging stops being an abstract concept and becomes a measurable biological process. It is not simply about getting older. It is about losing the capacity to repair. And once enough cells reach that limit, entire systems begin to break down, not suddenly, but progressively, in ways that feel inevitable, but are actually the result of a process that has been unfolding for decades. The fatigue that doesn't go away, the slower recovery, the gradual decline in strength, focus, and resilience, all of it traces back to this microscopic countdown happening inside you. But here is where the story takes a turn that most people never hear. Because if aging is being driven by something this specific, then the real question is whether that process can be influenced at all. And that question leads directly to a truth that has been overlooked for far too long, but the reality is most people have never even been told to look for it. We've been taught to accept this as a fact, that aging is inevitable, irreversible, and entirely outside of your control. You hear it everywhere. It's just part of getting older. Your body naturally breaks down. There's nothing you can do except manage the symptoms. And over time, you begin to believe it. You start adjusting your expectations, lowering your standards for how you should feel, convincing yourself that fatigue, slower recovery, brain fog, and chronic discomfort are simply the price you pay for living longer. But what if that belief is not only incomplete, but dangerously misleading? Because here's the reality most people are never told. Your body was not designed to fail passively. It was built with highly sophisticated repair systems mechanisms that, under the right conditions, can maintain and restore function far beyond what we typically expect. Central to that system are stem cells, often described as your body's internal repair force. When you're younger, these cells are active, responsive, constantly circulating and replacing damaged tissue. But as you age, their activity declines. And this is where the second major misconception takes hold. People assume that once stem cell activity drops, there is nothing left to do, that decline equals permanence, that the system has simply run out. But that assumption ignores something critical. In many cases, those cells are not gone, they are dormant. They are still there, still capable, but no longer receiving the signals needed to activate. And that distinction changes everything. Because if the system still exists, then the question is no longer whether aging happens, it's whether the underlying processes driving it can be influenced, supported, or even reactivated under the right conditions. This is the point where the conversation shifts from resignation to possibility, from managing decline to understanding mechanisms. And it's exactly at this intersection that Dr. Nathaniel Li began to question the narrative he had been taught for decades. Because once you stop seeing aging as a fixed outcome and start seeing it as a biological process, you begin to realize something most people never do. The body may not be failing, you may simply not be activating the systems designed to keep it functioning. And that realization is what led to a discovery that would fundamentally change how he approached health, recovery, and long-term resilience. But Dr. Nathaniel Li realized the story doesn't end there. After years of working with bodies that were breaking down far too early, Dr. Nathaniel Li began to notice a pattern that he could no longer ignore. It didn't matter whether the patient was in their late 40s or well into their 60s, the story was often the same. They weren't just dealing with one isolated issue, they were experiencing a gradual, systemic decline. Slower healing, persistent fatigue, reduced resilience, and a growing list of conditions that seemed unrelated on the surface but shared one underlying thread. Their bodies had lost the ability to repair themselves efficiently, and what struck him most was not how severe these conditions became, but how early they began to appear. These were not bodies that had reached the end of their lifespan. These were bodies that had simply stopped maintaining themselves. As an emergency medicine physician, Dr. Nathaniel Li was trained to respond to acute crises, to stabilize, to intervene when systems failed. But over time, he found himself asking a different question. What if the real problem wasn't the disease itself, but the gradual shutdown of the repair mechanisms that should have prevented it in the first place? That question led him deeper into the biology of aging, into telomeres, into stem cell activity, into the molecular signals that determine whether a cell continues to function or quietly fades into dysfunction. And the more he studied, the clearer the pattern became. The decline wasn't random, it was regulated. That realization changed everything, because if the process was regulated, it could potentially be influenced. And that's when his attention shifted away from symptom management and towards something far more fundamental: how to reactivate the body's own repair system. In that search, he encountered something that didn't fit the conventional model of modern medicine. It wasn't a new pharmaceutical breakthrough or an experimental clinical procedure. It was something far older, something that had been used for centuries but never fully understood in the context of modern cellular biology. A natural compound that appeared to interact directly with the very mechanisms that control cellular aging and regeneration. And that discovery opened the door to a completely different way of thinking about health, one that bridges ancient practice with measurable biological effect. And it ultimately led him to something that has existed for thousands of years, yet has largely been overlooked in modern conversations about aging. To understand why this matters, you need to look deeper into how your body repairs itself. Because everything we've talked about, telomeres shortening, stem cells going quiet, systems gradually breaking down, doesn't happen randomly. It follows specific biological pathways. And what Dr. Nathaniel Li uncovered is that this ancient compound appears to interact with four of the most critical systems that control whether your body declines or continues to repair itself. The first pathway centers on telomerase, the enzyme responsible for maintaining telomeres. Earlier, you learned that telomeres shorten with every cell division, acting like a countdown clock. But what most people don't realize is that your body already has a built-in mechanism to rebuild them. It's just largely inactive in most adult cells. Telomerase is like a repair tool that has been locked away, not because it no longer exists, but because it has been turned off. What Dr. Nathaniel Li found compelling is that certain compounds appear to influence the genetic expression of this enzyme, essentially signaling cells to restore part of that lost protective length. Not indefinitely, not unnaturally, but enough to potentially extend the functional lifespan of those cells. And if that sounds subtle, it isn't. Because even a small shift in telomere maintenance can change how long your cells remain capable of repair. The second pathway involves stem cell mobilization. And this is where things become even more practical. Your body still contains tens of millions of stem cells, primarily stored in your bone marrow. These cells are your internal repair system, capable of transforming into the exact type of tissue your body needs: muscle, blood vessels, even components of your immune system. But as you age, they don't disappear. They become inactive. They stay in reserve, waiting for a signal that, in many people, never comes. Dr. Nathaniel Li observed that specific biological signals can stimulate these cells to re-enter circulation, effectively sending them back into the bloodstream where they can locate damage and begin repair. Think of it as waking up an emergency response team that has been on standby for years, and once they are active again, the body regains access to a level of repair most people assume is gone forever. The third pathway addresses something less talked about but equally important: cellular senescence. These are often referred to as zombie cells. They are cells that have stopped dividing but refuse to die. Instead, they linger, releasing inflammatory signals that damage surrounding tissue and disrupt normal function. Over time, they accumulate, creating a toxic environment that accelerates aging at the tissue level. And here's the problem: your body's ability to clear these cells declines as you get older. Dr. Nathaniel Li identified that certain compounds may help reduce the impact of these senescent cells, not by aggressively eliminating them, but by protecting healthy cells from oxidative stress and maintaining the internal environment needed for proper function. The result is not just fewer dysfunctional cells, but a system that is better able to maintain itself. Because when you reduce the noise caused by these damaged cells, the body's natural repair processes can operate more effectively. The fourth pathway ties everything together: inflammation. More specifically, chronic low-grade inflammation, often referred to as inflammaging. This is not the acute inflammation you feel after an injury. This is a persistent, underlying state that quietly interferes with cellular function, suppresses stem cell activity, and accelerates telomere shortening. It is one of the most powerful drivers of biological aging, and most people don't even know it's happening. Dr. Nathaniel Li's work highlights how regulating this inflammatory baseline can create the conditions necessary for repair to occur. When inflammation is reduced, stem cells respond more effectively, cellular communication improves, and the body shifts from a defensive state into a regenerative one. And that shift is critical, because a body stuck in chronic inflammation cannot prioritize repair. It can only focus on survival. When you step back and look at these four pathways together, a pattern begins to emerge. This isn't about forcing the body to do something unnatural. It's about restoring processes that were always there but have been suppressed over time. Telomerase supports structural longevity at the cellular level. Stem cells restore function where damage has occurred. Reduced senescence limits disruption. Controlled inflammation creates the environment for all of it to work. And when these systems begin to align again, the body doesn't just slow down its decline, it changes direction. And when these systems come back online, the body is no longer just surviving, it begins to repair itself again. This is no longer theory. What Dr. Nathaniel Li has explored is grounded in a growing body of research that attempts to measure aging not as an abstract concept, but as a biological process that can be tracked, influenced, and in some cases, partially reversed. In one controlled human study, participants in their mid-50s were given a standardized extract over several months, and the results showed a measurable increase in telomere length, particularly in the shortest and most vulnerable segments. That detail is critical, because it's those critically short telomeres that are most closely linked to cellular dysfunction and accelerated aging. The placebo group showed no meaningful change, suggesting that the effect was not random variation, but a response tied to the intervention itself. In another line of research, scientists examined immune cells under controlled laboratory conditions and observed that within a short period of exposure, a significant number of samples demonstrated telomere extension. Based on known rates of telomere shortening, the magnitude of change was comparable to reversing several years of biological aging at the cellular level. Now, Dr. Nathaniel Li is careful to clarify this does not mean the entire organism becomes younger overnight, but it does challenge the long-held assumption that telomere length can only move in one direction. Animal studies provide another layer of insight. In models exposed to accelerated cellular damage, certain compounds were shown to enhance stem cell recovery in bone marrow, increasing both the speed and efficiency of regeneration. Treated subjects demonstrated stronger rebound capacity after stress, supported by improved mitochondrial function, an essential factor in long-term cellular resilience. In practical terms, their repair systems didn't just survive damage, they adapted and recovered more effectively. But this is where the conversation becomes more nuanced. The idea of activating telomerase has raised legitimate concerns, particularly around its potential link to uncontrolled cell growth. Some researchers caution that altering these pathways without full understanding could carry long-term risks. Others point out that results seen in controlled environments do not always translate directly to complex human systems. Dr. Nathaniel Li acknowledges these uncertainties directly. This is not a miracle solution. It is a signal that the biology of aging may be more flexible than we once believed, but still governed by limits we are only beginning to understand. So what you're seeing is not a final answer, but a shift in perspective, evidence that decline is not as fixed as it appears, and that the systems driving aging may be more responsive than we've been taught. But science, as always, rarely gives us simplicity. It gives us possibility, complexity, and the responsibility to approach both with clarity. Theory doesn't change, your body action does. And this is where everything you've learned either remains information or begins to translate into real, measurable change inside you. Because understanding telomeres, stem cells, and inflammation means nothing if you don't send your body consistent signals to support those systems. Dr. Nathaniel Li emphasizes that the goal is not intensity, but precision and repetition. A traditional approach begins with a slow-simmered root preparation, allowing water-soluble compounds to be extracted gently without degrading their structure. For a more controlled method, a standardized capsule taken with a small amount of healthy fat like olive oil or avocado can enhance the absorption of key fat-soluble components. It's not about which form you choose, it's about how consistently you give your body the signal to repair. But the real shift happens when you combine that signal with supportive inputs that reinforce the same pathways. Polyphenol-rich foods like pomegranate can support mitochondrial recycling, green tea helps regulate oxidative stress, and nutrient-dense berries contribute to lowering inflammation. Functional mushrooms may further support neural repair signal. On their own, each of these may seem minor, but together, they create an internal environment where repair becomes possible instead of suppressed. Now here's what most people want to know. What does this actually feel like over time? In the first week, you may notice subtle improvements in energy and mental clarity. By week 4, recovery begins to change, sleep feels deeper, fatigue becomes less persistent, and your baseline resilience stabilizes. By the 3-month mark, deeper shifts start to emerge, your body feels more responsive, more consistent, and less like it's working against you. not overnight transformation, but gradual restoration. Dr. Nathaniel Li makes this clear. The body responds to patterns, not short bursts of effort. And the signals you repeat each day either reinforce decline or begin to reverse it. Which is why, in the end, the difference between results and frustration rarely comes down to what you take, but how you apply it. Your body doesn't just respond to what you take, it responds to how you take it. And this is where small, often overlooked details begin to determine whether you see real results or nothing at all. Because your biology runs on timing, not randomness. Hormones like cortisol follow a daily rhythm, rising in the early morning and gradually declining throughout the day. When you introduce regenerative signals during that natural peak, your body is far more responsive, primed to mobilize repair rather than resist it. Taking these compounds within the first hour after waking aligns with that internal clock, allowing your system to work with the signal instead of against it. Absorption is just as critical. Some of the key compounds involved are water-soluble, while others require dietary fat to be properly utilized. If you're not matching the delivery method to the compound, you're leaving results on the table regardless of dosage. A liquid preparation may support one pathway, while capsules taken with healthy fats support another. It's not about doing more, it's about doing it correctly. Then there's cycling. Continuous use without pause can reduce your body's responsiveness over time. Short, structured breaks help maintain sensitivity, allowing the system to stay receptive to the signals you're sending. Because when your body adapts too quickly, progress slows without warning. And this is exactly where most people begin to drift. Not because the method fails, but because the execution slowly loses alignment. And that is where most results are lost. And this is why so many people never see results. Not because the science isn't real, and not because their body is incapable, but because the process is abandoned before it ever has a chance to take hold. You start with intention, you follow through for a few days, maybe a week, and then consistency fades. The signal weakens, the biology resets, and your body simply returns to the same pattern it has been following for years. Cellular repair is not immediate, it is cumulative, and without repetition, it never compounds into change. But inconsistency is only the surface. The deeper problem is the environment you're creating every day. Poor sleep, constant stress, ultra-processed food, and long periods of inactivity all send a clear message to your body, one that prioritizes survival, not repair. And when your system is locked in that state, no protocol can override it. You may be adding something beneficial, but at the same time, you're reinforcing the exact conditions that accelerate decline. Dr. Nathaniel Li addresses this directly because avoiding it would be misleading. No herb, no compound, no strategy can save you if you are consistently working against your own biology. That's not a flaw in the method, that's how the body functions. Every daily habit either supports regeneration or drives breakdown, and those signals accumulate faster than most people realize. And in the end, most people don't fail because the approach doesn't work. They fail because they never give their body the consistency, the time, or the conditions it needs to respond. Not because the method is ineffective, but because they never truly allow it to work. After everything, the question is not whether you are aging. That part is inevitable. Time will move forward, cells will divide, and the clock inside your body will continue its silent count. But what you've seen today changes something far more important: the direction of that process. Because aging is not just about time passing. It's about whether your body is still capable of repairing what time takes away. You've learned that telomeres don't simply disappear without reason, that stem cells don't vanish but often remain inactive, and that the systems responsible for keeping you functional are still there, waiting for the right signals. And that means the story of your health is not fixed, it is still being written every single day by the choices you repeat. Dr. Nathaniel Li has spent decades watching what happens when those systems are ignored and what becomes possible when they are supported, not through extremes, not through shortcuts, but through consistent alignment with how the body is designed to function. This is not about reversing time, it's about restoring direction. And that shift, subtle at first, is what separates gradual decline from long-term resilience. So if this changed the way you see your own health, don't let it stay as information. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who may still believe that decline is their only path forward. Save this video, come back to it, let it guide your daily decisions. And if you want to keep learning how to support your body at the deepest level, make sure you're subscribed, because what you've seen today is only the beginning. Because according to Dr. Nathaniel Li, your body is not working against you, it is simply responding to what you repeat every day. And the real question is, starting tomorrow, what will you choose to repeat?